Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show, the show that says maybe we'll start on time if I remember to click the link when I'm supposed to click the link. It's Tuesday, February 2nd, Groundhog Day, otherwise known as the feast day of open source production values. Andrew Malcolm is still on travel, so joining us today to co-host a special episode of the Ed Morrissey Show, Jeff Dunitz from lidblog.com.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Who is playing with his Nintendo
the Jewish
Switch.
space laser.
Oh, he's working the Jewish space laser, folks. That's what he's doing there. The Jewish space laser.
See, it's behind me.
Known. Well, it is behind you. Where's the Catholic space laser? I think it's behind it. I think we're behind you with the Catholic space laser.
I took this picture on a Sunday. On Saturdays, you could see the Catholic one.
That's because the Jewish space laser doesn't effing roll on Shabbos.
On effing Shabbos, exactly.
Well, thanks for everybody for being here. It's great to have you with us. We're going to have AJ Kaufman drop in a little bit. We're hoping to see him here shortly. He's going to drop in when he can. We're going to have a nice three-way discussion. And Brian Berkey says we've seen our shadow, which means we've got 6 more weeks of open source production values. He is so correct.
Ed, we have 4 more years of Obama.
4 more years of Obama. That's what seeing that meant. It was 4 more years of Obama. You're exactly correct, Jeff Dunitz. Well, we've got a lot of things to talk about. I guess we can talk a little bit about impeachment today. We've seen both sides now have presented briefs on this. We saw the 77 or 78 page brief from House Democrats, which was released today, and then the Trump legal team released a 14-page response to the articles of impeachment, not the brief, but the articles of impeachment, and started off propitiously with misspelling the United States of America. That was really the only obvious, typo that was made. It was the United States of America was the typo, and
it was close.
Well, it's also not something you're going to catch on with a spell check because unites is an actual word, so it's not going to show up. On the other hand,
starting it off with "Dear Senate."
Please excuse Donald from impeachment. Signed, Donald's mother.
Yes.
For those of you who remember, welcome back, Connor.
That was when that was Donald Epstein's mother.
No, Donald Epstein's mother. That's right. And Ryan Small says 4 more years of Obama if Obama had significant mental decline. We're going to get into all sorts of different things today, but let's stick with impeachment for just a little bit. No surprises today. I think that we saw the legal arguments that we were expecting to see. The only thing that I would say was there's a little bit more reliance on the stolen election narrative, but it doesn't look like they're actually going to use that as a defense. If you read it all the way through, I'm talking about Trump's response now, they mention it as one of the point-by-point rebuttals to the article of impeachment, but then when they get down to the defenses that they expect to present in the Senate, that's actually not listed among them.
Plus,
there's some constitutional...
They put it in perspective of, you know what? It was his opinion, and it's the First Amendment, and the president can have First Amendment rights also.
Well, of course, president has First Amendment rights. And what I would say that what is notable about that is he's not arguing that he has a First Amendment right to incite. Now, some people saying, well, the First Amendment thing, there's limits to First Amendment. The First Amendment only comes up in context of whether or not he was deliberately spreading falsehoods about the election, and it's his opinion that that the election was not conducted properly, and that his First Amendment right is he can say that whether or not it's objectively true or not. It's his opinion that he can say that. They didn't get into he's got a First Amendment right to incite. What they did say on the incitement part was he never did incite them. All he said was that you've got to fight for your country in the way that people use the term fight in political campaigns all the time. It's a fairly common use.
Did I miss it, or did they skip the part where he actually said, don't be violent and be patriotic or something like that.
I'm not sure that he said it quite that way. But here's the problem with the incitement thing.
About.
Yeah, here's the problem with the incitement charge. Legally speaking, it's a non-starter. He didn't say anything in there that you could point to that would get past a Brandenburg test. You have to know Brandenburg. You have to understand what the bar is on incitement in order to justify a prosecution of it. But on the other hand, you have to also remember that this isn't a prosecution. This is an impeachment, which means that this is inherently a political process, not a criminal process, and that you don't have to be criminally liable in order for the Senate to convict you. It's a political process, and if they feel that whatever he did crossed whatever line, and you can certainly understand why a large number of them might feel that way, having been chased out of the Capitol building on January 6th. You can understand why some people would feel that way. So, I mean, some of this is interesting. Some of it is just maybe beside the point here. If we're talking about criminal tests for incitement, yeah, this isn't going to make it. But as a political issue, it's still not going to make it because we know that the Senate's not going to vote to convict. They're not going to get 67 votes to convict Trump.
Well, it did talk about impeachment wasn't meant for partisan politics.
Right, which is the reason why there's supermajority required in the Senate. It's the reason why you have to have 67.
Over and over again, you can't throw someone out of office who's out of office.
Well, it doesn't say that actually. It doesn't say that you can either. That's the problem. They're going to have to figure this. They're going to have to figure this out. Now, there's a lot about the jurisdictional issue in the Trump response. The jurisdictional issue is actually attached to every single response they have, except for the one, which is point 6, where they're arguing about election fraud. They didn't attach the mootness argument to that one, which I found kind of interesting. They did attach it to everything else, and it's very clear if you read through the final couple of pages where they lay out what their positive defenses are going to be, that one of the positive defenses is mootness. You know, they're gonna argue that the issue is moot because he's no longer in office. Again, at this point, the only thing that you can say is that the Senate's going to have to decide where its jurisdiction ends. The House brief does touch on that, though, actually quite a bit.
What do you think of what Lindsey Graham said? If you start calling witnesses, we're going to call the FBI to talk about how they screwed up the response.
I mean, honestly, I understand what he's trying to do. The point that I think that Lindsey Graham is trying to make is that they'll drag it out.
Right.
To me, that's a
show
bluff.
that it wasn't him that did it. It was
It's a bluff. The last thing Republicans need is to drag this thing out. They really want to get it over with. The longer it drags out, the worse it is for Republicans. So I don't know what Lindsey Graham thinks that he's going to do with that, but Democrats don't really want to call witnesses either, because if you call witnesses, then you got to depose the witnesses first. Then it drags out for them. The longer this goes without actually having the trial, the less sense it makes. They do need to strike while the iron is hot. So there is sort of a time pressure on them. But for the most part, this is just bad news for Republicans, and that's what Democrats are doing. They're herding them into a cul-de-sac.
Good point.
You know, they're forcing Republicans to vote one way or the other on Trump, and either way they vote, it splits the party. This is Andy McCarthy talked about this, I think, on Friday.
I think that
Thursday.
The crazy new congresswoman from Georgia is hurting the party more.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the other thing, too. I mean, the Marjorie Taylor Greene part is it's problematic. They've got a problem with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and again, because it's also going to split the party. You've got people who want to... Now you've got the Liz Cheney side of the House and the Marjorie Taylor Greene side of the House. I did see something interesting about this. You know, of course, we just got done with the census. There's going to be a reapportionment, and then after that you do redistricting. And there are some that are suggesting that the Georgia legislature just might redistrict Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat so that they can throw her to the wolves. I'm not exactly sure where her seat's at, and if that makes any sense, but it certainly is sort of an amusing thing to do. I think we've got AJ coming on with us here.
I think also they might redistrict AOC out of a job because she's talking about going after Schumer again.
Not just Schumer, but Manchin and Sinema too. Hey, AJ, how you doing?
Doing well, guys. I was looking for the laser outside.
Oh, you don't see it's right behind me.
It's right behind
I know.
him.
Well, that's why I didn't find it out in the farmland beyond my abode here.
Well,
if you want, I'll send you the code for playing with it. Because you being a member of the Worldwide Jewish Conspiracy, also,
I'm just happy to have access to the secret Catholic space lasers. So
Yeah, he gets that.
All right, so AJ Kaufman, Eric Kaufman from alphanewsmn.com joins us, and we've got lots to discuss. We were just in the middle of kind of wrapping up the impeachment discussion, the Marjorie Taylor Greene versus Liz Cheney discussion. Before we get into what's going on at Alpha News MN and all the dirt that you have on Anthony Gakowski, I'm hoping that you develop some dirt on Anthony.
Got nothing.
Dang it! Yeah, he's a slippery dude, man. He's a very slippery dude.
He is. I tried.
But why don't you tell us? Why don't you give us your thoughts on this party split that's sort of developing between the Liz Cheney side and the Marjorie Taylor Greene side, and how you see this playing out over the next couple of years?
The fact that there is a Marjorie Taylor Greene side of the party, a crazy woman who's been in Congress for 2.5 weeks or whatever, is kind of troubling. Maybe there's a Matt Gaetz side. The fact that a guy who's second term, third term congressman is flying to Wyoming to campaign against someone in House leadership 2 years before the primary, 2 years before the election, I guess a year or so before the primary, and the opponents of Marjorie Taylor Greene type conspiracist is troubling. It seems like we have, I wouldn't say two parties, because I think the governing party, if you will, the people that were at the White House yesterday and the Liz Cheneys, and that goes all the way down to the Marco Rubios, and in the House to the majority of House members, including, I would say, all the members here in Minnesota, are the majority. But you do have a party of people that are like a platform party, or are really more interested in getting likes on Twitter and appearances on Sean Hannity's show or whomever, or Lou Dobbs' show, than they are in passing legislation or just being normal congressmen and representing their constituents. I guess they're activists for the cause they want, and they'll primary who they want. And primary challenges can be good. Don't get me wrong. Eric Cantor, people like that. Some of those primary challenges, I think we're okay. I don't think primarying Liz Cheney in a very, in a state that's she represents the whole state. I mean, there's one congressman. It's like North Dakota and South Dakota. So I understand the state's heavily Republican and voted for Trump, but I'm pretty sure she's serving them well. Could look at some polls and maybe disagree, but it's confusing, and it's playing into the Democrats' hand. That's the problem. And I think I heard you guys mention that right before I got on.
Yeah, I mean, this is more or less in the context of the impeachment trial, which I think is, Andy McCarthy, I think, analyzed it pretty well as basically a huge trap, a huge cul-de-sac that Chuck Schumer is only too happy to herd Republicans into. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's, I agree with you. I mean, I think that this is unfortunate. I think Gates going to, I don't know that I've ever seen that before. Have you ever seen that where you have
not flying from Pensacola or DC to Cheyenne in the middle of winter? No.
Or going against campaigning against an incumbent of your own party.
A year and a half before there's going to be a primary. Right. I mean, I've just never seen that before.
But did you hear what Ronna McDaniel said today?
No.
She said, I regret that we ever let Rudy Giuliani speak about the election.
Yes, he appeared at one of their functions, I think.
No, but he was talking about on TV, and he was talking about how they were nuts.
Well, that too, but I mean, I think the specific context was it was an RNC event at which he did this, and that's what she was regretting.
I think what she was trying to do is move the party away from Rudy.
Rudy's not the issue.
Rudy was a member. I don't know. Rudy hasn't held office in 17 years, as far as I know, or 18.
Right.
19.
Yeah, it's a Trump issue, and she's trying to be a little too cute by using Rudy as a stand-in for Trump. That's so. At any rate, there's a question from the chat room, the traditional Ed Morrissey Show chat room, and if you're over on the Facebook side, you can join both at the same time. It's the one place where the rules of physics do not apply. You can actually be in two places at the same time. You go to crankytrex.com/chatasar, SAUR, and then you're there. And the question comes from Severe Cruz Conservative. What legislation do Republicans want passed? It's hard to imagine any legislation that gets 60 votes in the Senate and Biden's signature is worth anything. And I think this is, the problem with both sides, is that there are going to be places where there's overlap between agendas, between desires. For instance, COVID relief. I think there are some Republicans who want to do something on COVID relief. You saw them propose a $600 billion addendum, basically, to the previous bill. And Democrats want to do $1.9 trillion. That's a negotiation. I don't like either one of those, by the way. I think we should wait to see how much good the previous money that we've already allocated is doing before we start passing something else. But I also understand the political moment here. There's also budgets. Budgets have to get passed. There are going to be issues with COVID that have to get passed, that have to be dealt with. And the question is, do you do that in a way that you can work with both sides to give them each something that they want while getting things done, or are you simply going to stand on, your own ideology and try to play majoritarian games with it?
That's something that disturbed me today, because yesterday they had a nice 2-hour meeting with the 10 Republican and President Biden. And right away, Schumer, Pelosi going, well, we're going to ram something through.
Yeah.
It's just like,
it goes both ways.
Ed, let it develop at least a day or two.
I think you're right on, Ed, and Jeff. The idea is we're not going to get a lot of conservative legislation passed in the next 2 years until we have a chance to maybe take back the House and maybe pick up a seat in the Senate, though I think the map is pretty tough in 2022. But to get some bills passed that are bipartisan and, that actually are going to help the country and help constituents would be good. The Democrats have to be willing to play, though, too, because, in the election last year, in November, the Republicans, we forget, because of what happened in Georgia, which was recently, we forget the Republicans did very well in the House, surprisingly well. And in the Senate, a lot of people, including myself, I thought they would lose 3 or 4 seats on election day net. And they only lost 1. And they lost the 2 in Georgia, which was unfortunate, but there's a whole other discussion to go with Georgia. So I don't think that, the public holds Democrats in high esteem down ballot. A lot of it was an anti-Trump vote. A lot of it was Biden is an everyman Democrat. He's a moderate, though I don't think that's not the case the first 2 weeks. But they thought he was the person who could beat Trump. Whether, Amy Klobuchar used to wear shirts saying Amy Klobuchar will beat Donald Trump. And maybe she would have, but most of the other candidates probably would not. So I think the country may have preferred Biden, but they didn't prefer Democrats in the Senate. They didn't prefer him in the House. And I do think the voters are going to get sick of this high and mighty tone from the Democrats that they've had certainly since the election, but really since January 6th. It's like everything since January 6th, everything in their agenda since January 6th has gotten pushed left because they think that, whatever happened at the Capitol embodies the entire conservative movement, which it doesn't. It's a fringe group, populist. Terrible thing that happened, but it doesn't mean Democrats can do whatever they want for the next 18, 19, 20 months.
By the way,
but
Jeff,
it gave them an opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, because everyone was pissed off at what happened at the Capitol, rightfully so, but it gave the Democrats the ammo to go ahead and do whatever they want.
Yeah, it did.
So one of the aspects of the relief bill you've written about, Ari, you wrote about the minimum wage, which is what I've been calling the poison pill.
Yep.
inside this bill, and I think that this is the reason why, one of the big reasons why they can't get 10 Republicans to come along with them on this, because they're just simply, they don't even have Manchin along with them for a $15 minimum wage hike. He wants it to be limited to $11.
But he said he'd vote for it.
He said he'd vote to get it past cloture. I don't know that he said he's going to vote for the bill itself, and so that still remains to be seen. And there's a whole other thing with Manchin we can talk about, that the progressives are going to target him and Sinema for.
Yeah, not for 4 years though, or 3.5. I mean,
Yeah, but they got to start recruiting now, because these Senate election cycles, and Manchin's already got plenty of incentives to cross the aisle.
Good luck finding someone left of Manchin to win in West Virginia.
He barely won the last time, and he's the most moderate Democrat in the entire
only
caucus.
Democrat that could get elected in West Virginia in the whole country, probably, and good for him, I guess. But good luck running a professor at Marshall University or something against him, or.
By the way, Rick Trader on Facebook does have a really good comment. He said he should be on this show. He's also bald. Maybe that's what we should call Maybe that's what we should call it when the three of us are together. Is the bald guys? I don't know.
What happened when I was
three bald amigos?
What was that, area? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say that I had a Zoom forum about 2 months ago with two other bald guys, and it was the same kind of comments. And maybe we should all wear hats next time.
We could do that. We could all wear hats, men in hats. That's what we could call that. So yeah, I mean the issue with the minimum wage, we can argue about the minimum wage, because I think it's a bad idea, especially when you're dealing with an economic crisis, to start hiking labor costs on business owners that are barely able to keep their doors open as it is. But even beyond that, the political reality is that that's not really COVID relief. It doesn't belong in that particular bill. And that is, including it in that bill, is an act of partisanship. It is a signal, I would say, that they are not interested in partisanship. They're not interested in negotiating. They're interested in majoritarian imposition. I'll throw that one to Jeff first.
Schumer has to. Okay, forget what Biden did. Schumer has to, because still strong rumor that AOC is going to primary him, which means that he has to move decisively left. And he starts already left. So if he doesn't go for that $15 an hour minimum wage, he's in trouble. And by the way, AJ's article on the $15 minimum wage was great.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you haven't read it, folks, yet, go over there and read it.
The link's in the show post, by the way, so you can go just click on it and go right over there. So tell us a little bit about what your take is on the minimum wage itself, and how you see this in terms of the politics of this particular moment.
Well, I decided to write it for the St. Cloud Times. They've been willing to run an article of mine pretty much whenever I've submitted for the past few years. Haven't written quite as much for them in a while because I've been working for Alpha News. But it got in the Sunday paper. It's under 600 words, and it's mostly about policy. I don't think I mentioned the name Schumer in there, or Pelosi, but I mean, I wasn't an economics major, but I mean, maybe they teach it differently now, 20 years later. But one of the things I think I learned in freshman year economics was that the minimum wage is harmful to those it purports to help. Usually, I'm guessing they probably do teach it differently now, frankly, at most of the colleges. But I admire people that work in fast food. I admire people that work at minimum wage jobs. I admire them more than I admire the three of us in some ways, right? But,
right.
It's strenuous, but it's not there to be the breadwinner of your family. It's not there for a 40-year-old to support a family of four. I mean, if you can, that's great. But my biggest problem with it is the national aspect of it. I mean, I've made this case before. It's like, you're going to give the same wage to the guy at McDonald's in Casper, Wyoming, as you are in New York City. The average rent in Casper is $638 a month. The average rent in New York City, Jeff, is $3,500 a month.
Mm-hmm.
For the same
$3,500 is cheap. You're talking about it's $3,500 a square foot.
Right.
No, I'm not joking though.
Look, if the restaurants and places and businesses in New York City and Seattle and San Francisco can afford it, and they want to give $15 an hour, not forced by anyone, or even if the state wants to pass a law or the city, go for it. It didn't work in Seattle, by the way. I mentioned that in my article. It did not work. It had negative side effects on hours and employment. It didn't.
I've seen estimates that a $15 minimum wage would kill at least 3 million jobs in the country.
I've seen it range from 1.3 to 3 million, depending on.
And the argument back is that it would help some people. Well, it might help some people temporarily, but it's going to hurt more people and probably hurt those people it helped in the long term. So, yeah, a guy, and again, it's just simple math. In Nebraska, where I used to live, the starting salary for a state government worker, college degree, white collar job, I think is like $28,000 or $29,000 a year. And if you're making $15 an hour, that's more than $29,000 a year.
Right.
So let's see how long that lasts when the state workers find out that people flipping burgers are making more than they are.
Well, and that's the problem, because what it does is it escalates the scales.
Right.
And I mean, I used to work in a industry where I was hiring people not at the minimum wage, but usually a couple of dollars higher than the minimum wage. It was office work. It was there was a lot of investment in training in that particular job because it was very specialized. The functions that I used to manage and then direct. And I was forever getting into arguments with upper management over, the floor wage for my area, because every time you'd have a minimum wage hike, it would erode my competitive standing in the marketplace. And I'd have to keep coming back to them and saying, you guys have to raise the level here because we're not getting the people that you expect to hire for these jobs. And they would say the same thing back to me. And I knew that this was an issue, which was, if we raise the minimum floor in your area, we are going to have to raise the minimum floor in all areas, because then suddenly your people are getting hired at higher rates than some of the other people are, or it throws off the competitive balance.
Then you have to raise what you charge.
Well, this is the problem. You either have to find a way to cut costs someplace else, or you have to increase your prices. And so minimum wage hikes end up being inflationary. And after not that long of a time, and we used to talk to King Banyan about this, you're up in, you're writing up in St. Cloud, King.
I do. And his wife, Barbara.
And his wife, Barbara, great people. The problem with that is that in a relatively short period of time, all it does is just reset the scale of living costs of living, because prices increase. So whatever buying power you're adding to people evaporates, and not really after all that long of a time. And so that's the reason why we've kept hiking the minimum wage, is because it doesn't actually solve a problem. It just shifts the scale of the problem. And, if minimum wage hikes solve the problems, we wouldn't still be hiking minimum wages.
It's an emotional issue. I mean, when Bernie Sanders is up there yelling about living wages and poverty and talking about we can all afford to pay a few extra nickels for our cheeseburgers, for a lot of people, it's
not me. They're not kosher.
There you go. Well, it's for your kosher hot dog, Hebrew National. It's a deceivingly simplistic argument. It really is. And I know I have liberal friends who are against it, by the way. I talked to one today. People who actually have some common sense and run businesses, or one of them told me the other day his 16-year-old son, he doesn't deserve $15 an hour. He just said it to me point blank. Doesn't.
Right.
So,
I have a great example of what you do for one, you have to do for the other. I used to work for Disney Publishing. I was the Eastern advertising director for a magazine. I had to work the day after Thanksgiving. Do you know why? Because if they gave me off, they had to give the thousands of people in the parks time and a half.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing.
So you do for one, you got to do for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complicated set of economic and financial relationships that you're upsetting with this stuff. And to solve the problem that Bernie Sanders really wants solved, you have to grow more jobs so that that he ostensibly wants solved.
Sorry.
That he ostensibly wants solved, right? Yeah. You have to grow more jobs.
Open up the country.
Well, you have to grow more jobs, and right. when you have what you want is labor shortages, because labor shortages drive up the cost of labor in an organic manner, to which you can have specific responses. You don't want them for very long. You want the labor markets to balance out eventually.
That's right.
But that's how you grow real wages. This is not how you grow real wages. All you're doing is costing people jobs. And the other thing that happens is that more jobs get lost to automation, because as you increase the cost of labor, suddenly the cost of automation, there's a cost benefit ratio where suddenly that starts looking like a rational choice. And that's the reason why in Seattle, one of the reactions to the $15 minimum wage was simply to replace everybody who used to take orders and put up iPads because they're cheaper.
It's a fact. And I'd also point out another fact I mentioned in my article, but only fewer than 2% of people that are paid hourly in the country are making $7.25 an hour. It's really only in extremely rural places and low-cost areas. So when you hear $7.25, yeah, it's a tough life making $7.25, especially if you really do have to support yourself or your family. But it's like 1.8% of the country,
right?
Of hourly workers, which means it's probably under 1% of the country overall.
And it's a starting wage.
It is a starting.
It's a starting wage. People say, well, they haven't given minimum wage workers a raise in 8 years. Well, it's nonsense. If they've worked continuously for 8 years, I guarantee you that they're either getting raises or they're not working very well. Right. People get raises once they get the jobs. What's happening is when you raise the cost of labor, it makes it more difficult for them to find those jobs in the first place.
Right.
And so this is one of those areas, though, politically speaking, which is really great for pandering, but doesn't make a whole lot of other sense. And to stick it in the middle of the COVID relief bill is not just irrelevant, it's irrelevant to that. And that, by the way, that still might not fly with the parliamentarian. I haven't heard if there's a ruling on that yet or not. But under reconciliation, which is the process by which they're doing this COVID relief bill, and that just started today. They held the vote, and Kamala Harris had to come in and cast a tie-breaking vote to keep it moving. It has to pass a parliamentarian, and Republicans can challenge that as not relevant to the overall relief spending, and the parliamentarian might say, no, you got to strike it out.
Well, and then that's what happens when you also have a socialist in charge of the budget committee.
Yeah, you got Bernie in charge of in charge of the budget committee. You've got Elizabeth Warren, apparently. What did I just say? It just went by me. Elizabeth Warren went to finance. I'm not sure if she's the chair of the finance or if she's going to finance. Nope, just joining the finance committee. And her on her agenda is the wealth tax on fortunes over $50 million.
Well, it'll only affect you, Ed. So
that's true. It's true. And only that amount that's over my $50 million
right.
rainy day fund, right? The rest of it, that's the problem. I guess we shouldn't point out that that's actually unconstitutional. The federal government doesn't have that sort of authority. State governments can, but the federal government doesn't actually have authority to tax wealth in that manner. You're going to have to pass a constitutional amendment, just like they did with the 16th Amendment, for taxing income rates, because there's no authority under the federal Constitution to tax individuals in any other manner. But I suspect that we're going to find that out pretty shortly.
They'll say they have to do it. Time is of the essence. We have no time to wait, and it demands to be done. I hear that.
Yeah, unlike the minimum wage, though, I think that one's going to die in court really fast. Somebody with $50 million plus a couple of dimes is going to file a lawsuit over it. And that'll be the end of it.
But I would love to see people like Bill Gates have to do it anyway. because they're constantly saying that, people should, the rich should pay more in taxes. Fine. You pay more.
They're not going to pay.
Touch me.
Check the box.
Nobody's going to pay. That's the other thing. I mean, Bill Gates put his money into foundations. He's got foundations for his kids, for his grandkids. He doesn't have that money anymore. For
vaccines too.
Well, it's part of his it's part of his foundation. He does a lot of good work with the foundation. I'm not knocking his charitable work. He does a lot of good work for the foundation through those foundations. But that's what rich people do when you start talking about asset taxes. And this is what they do in states, because states actually can tax assets. Most of them don't anymore. But there was a time in some states where the tax assessor would come to your house and start looking at everything you had in your house to figure out how much tax you owed that year.
So the federal government cannot tax asshats.
Well, I'd say that the federal government does a pretty good job of taxing asshats.
Right.
They can't tax assets.
Oh, okay.
Got it.
They can tax income because there's a constitutional amendment that allows them to tax income. They can't tax wealth because there's no authority in the Constitution for the federal government to impose taxes on individuals other than what's in the 16th Amendment.
That's right.
So I mean, this is posturing. It's all posturing. So I mean, this is the minimum wage thing. This is something that comes up all the time. And you can't just say it's posturing, because they're going to try to pass this thing.
Oh yeah,
a lot of virtual signaling. I think the overall takeaway from this, and I'm going to throw this to both of you guys, is that what you've got here is a very slender Democratic majority, a very slender House majority, and a president who was barely elected. He's still elected. I'm not saying that he doesn't have authority, but elected in a very close election, basically going full progressive, as though there was some sort of a landslide mandate that carried Democrats to office, like what actually happened 12 years ago. You could argue that they had that kind of a mandate 12 years ago. That was actually a landslide election for Democrats across the board. That didn't happen this time, and I mean, really, honestly, this is sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like they're not quite tuned into reality here. We talk about overreach, but this might be a land speed record for overreach. And I'll start with Ari this time.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can look at it and say that Biden won by 7 million votes or whatever, which is a sizable enough victory, but most of those were in California. Right, you could also look the other way and say, just as Trump won the election in 2016 with 3 states by 75,000 votes, Biden won with 3 states, but Georgia, Wisconsin, and Arizona. If you take those off the board, I think it's right around 269 each. And he won those states by fewer than 75,000 votes, like 61,000. So it was pretty close. And he is off to the most left-wing start of any Democrat in my lifetime, including Barack Obama, even though the theme of his inaugural address and his campaign were unity and moderation. And his career, I think he's more liberal than people realize, but, he's not Bernie Sanders either. But no, it's not new for Democrat presidents to want to tax and spend and regulate. But I think the cultural agenda is troubling. And I would include in that, everything from abortion and the racial equity to the Keystone Pipeline, which I'd call a cultural issue because the environmentalist cadre doesn't have the facts on their side, in my opinion, when it comes to that. And it's killing jobs, and it's cultural because most of the wealthy environmentalists are living in New York, San Francisco, Boston, Seattle, LA, and not in Minot, North Dakota, and Billings, Montana, or St. Cloud, Minnesota. So, yeah, it's rapid fire. It's coming every day. I didn't even look today at what he did with immigration, but I'm sure the 11 million are going to get amnesty, or he's going to try. And there are far left people who voted for him who wanted this. It's not like the far left people sat out, or else he wouldn't have gotten 81 million votes. But everything that I mentioned, including the minimum wage that we mentioned, these are just progressive causes that certainly Clinton bill didn't pursue. And I'd say Obama would have liked to, but wasn't able to because the country wasn't there, at least on the cultural side. So that's my general idea on it.
Jeff?
Well, first of all, if anybody really wanted to get rid of the abortion issue, somebody should do a scientific study proving that abortion causes global warming. But he's doing everything he said he would do. Yeah. You know, when you look at it, I mean, in the opposite way, that's what people were upset about Trump for doing. But he said he's going to get rid of the pipeline. He said he's going to get rid of the fence. You know, he said that he wants to expand abortion rights. Okay. He hasn't done anything that, you know, and when we were warning people, hey, he's going to do this, they're going to say, nah, he's not that crazy. But even Bernie Sanders said he's going to be the most progressive president we ever had.
He did. Yeah.
You know, and he is. Guess what?
All right, let's change topics. I've got two more topics I want to hit you guys both with. The first is, and we could probably do this briefly. Did you see the report from Variety today about CNN and MSNBC's ratings, primetime ratings?
Hot Air mentioned it, so I saw it.
Yep. Oh, well, there you go. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm not surprised by this. I may be surprised by the extent of the decline. 44% for CNN's ratings, 20% for MSNBC's ratings. I want to preface this by saying there's always a letdown after an election. Once it's settled, there's always a letdown. And I think after January 6th, and you know, there was obviously a huge spike in interest in what happened on January 6th, but I think after a couple of days of that, people really did start tuning out and saying, you know, see you. So some of this, I think, is just ennui. Exhaustion, not even ennui, exhaustion. But it's notable that Fox News' numbers didn't drop hardly at all in prime time. And CNN's and MSNBC's did. And Donald Trump used to say, without me, these guys are going to be out of business. And I think this is a demonstration of just how much they modeled their strategic planning around Donald Trump. And I'm going to throw it to Jeff first. I mean, what did you say? What did you see? Or what did you think, I guess, when you first saw these numbers?
I expected it because, look, I'm a political geek. Okay. I spend all my time examining politics. I'm tired of it. Okay. I've shifted from less from the fighting of politics to the policy. And people don't care about policy as much. Okay. And when you talk about Fox, I think they dropped their ratings before the 6th.
They did. Actually, they had a ratings drop after the
election.
Well, after the election, prior to Christmas, right?
Right.
Because of
people started going on to Newsmax because they decided that Fox was no longer 100% pro-Trump.
We're mad at Chris Stirewalt. Poor Chris Stirewalt.
Right.
Yeah, I feel bad for Chris Stirewalt.
Right, and they took it out on the wrong people.
I agree.
I agree with that. All right, so
so it's not a surprise because I think that the average non-political geek person is really sick and tired of watching. You know, my traffic since the week after the 6th has gone into the toilet. It's not that my writing all of a sudden got bad. It's that, well, okay, but
just kidding.
You know, I mean, I'm not getting what I got before then, but I'm certainly still getting a lot of traffic. Right.
But
what I'm saying is that people aren't desperate for political news anymore.
Well, I think it's cyclical, though. It's cyclical. It'll come back.
Start building again.
Well, I'd like to see what the numbers are for NewYorkTimes.com, even CNN.com, Washington Post. Not newspaper subscriptions, but actual visits to their websites,
clicks, page views. Yeah.
Yeah. When hot air is not directing people there,
I think they're probably going down also.
I would think so. And Ed, but more importantly, congratulations on using OnWay. Or
thank you.
That's ENNUI for those following at home.
And if you want to hear it more, there's a song by Cole Porter called "I Get a Kick Out of You" that uses it.
Well, there
That's
you go.
right. Yeah.
I didn't know.
No, I used to be a musical theater performer. That's why.
I think some of this is cyclical. I think, though, to Jeff's point, and again, I'm going to go back to Ari on this one. To Jeff's point, I think part of the problem is that it's gotten so tribal that policy has become very secondary, even tertiary. I mean, I think that the primary driver these days of political interest is blood sport. It's owning the libs, it's owning the cons, it's, that sort of thing. And I would say that probably accounts for it, except for the fact that Fox News's traffic didn't drop off that much. And I'm wondering if owning Trump is really what the problem was over at CNN and MSNBC. And now that Trump has gone silent because apparently the guy doesn't know how to hold a press conference without it being on Twitter or Facebook, that their model dried up, Ari. I mean, that's kind of what it looks like.
Well, they're going to hate.
Well, hold on, Jeff. Let me let Ari in on this one.
I think it's just judging by numbers and anecdotal evidence. A lot of conservatives did go to OAN and Newsmax after the election, for better or worse. I think, but that apparently is stabilized now. And the question is how long OAN and Newsmax can keep up those ratings with Trump out of office, because Fox's opinion shows are going to be similar to theirs when it comes to attacking the left. I would like to know where the daytime ratings are compared to the primetime, because I've told this to liberals for years because they like to say Fox this and Fox that. And I say, there's 4 hours in the evening of opinion, and 4 now because they added a different show at 7 Eastern.
Right.
But during the day, with the exception of 1 or 2 hours, it's hard news. And I think it's pretty good hard news when I get a chance to watch during the day. And Brett Baer's show is good at 5 p.m. Central. So Fox has 2 different networks, in my opinion, sometimes. And people who are mad at Fox that are hardcore Trump supporters that go to OAN, they're not mad at Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson. They're mad at Brett Baer and Chris Wallace and Chris Steyerwalt and Bill Hemmer and Britt Hume or whoever's on the news team. So I'd be interested to see what the news numbers are compared to opinion. CNN and MSNBC, you guys might know better than I do, but they don't seem to have the wall between news and opinion. I mean, I think Don Lemon still says his show is a news show. That's absurd. That'd be like Hannity saying his show's news, and he doesn't.
Right.
MSNBC's pretty open about their agenda, but CNN, if you ask the average person on the street who doesn't follow it, they still believe Fox right wing, MSNBC left wing, CNN down the middle. When I need my news, I go to CNN.
All right, Jeff. Throw it to you.
My news, I actually flipped between Fox, CNN, and Newsmax because personally, and I tell my family this when they come and say, "Did you hear?" I go, "Did you double check it?"
Yeah.
Because I don't believe any of them. Okay, that's the truth. And
I think especially after the last couple of months.
And I also think that people, you can't blame. You were asking about the daytime. They just redid their daytime at Fox.
They did.
And so that says to me things weren't going great on the daytime.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, they're doing 2-hour news shows instead of 1 hour, it seems like. And
right. And the other thing is that you can't blame the whole network for people like Chris Wallace and other people. But to me, Chris Wallace doesn't hide it. I mean, he doesn't try to, and he's probably the most experienced as a quote unquote newsman. So
yeah, I'm wondering how he will be now that Trump is gone too.
Yeah,
I think a lot of Wallace's issues was directly related to Donald Trump.
Yes.
So. Yeah.
But you know what? I'm not watching it this Sunday. There's a football game I want to watch. And I've seen most of the commercials, and there's actually one that I think is funny. But other than that,
what is this? What is this game of, what's it called? Football?
It's called A Very Big Ball. You can't say the name because then the NFL will go after you and sue you. So you have to call it, like, what, a giant ball, or something like that. A Jewish space laser bowl. I don't know.
The Jewish space laser bowl. That's what I think it is. There you go. But you can't have it on Saturday because it doesn't effing roll on effing show.
After sunset on Sunday, yeah.
All right.
I stopped watching the Sunday shows because I've started hanging with my family on Sundays. Strange thing.
I don't generally watch them anyway. I'll wait to see what
get clips
rises. Yeah, I'll watch the clips. I'll go read the transcripts. I just don't want to get up that early in the morning. I have other things to do, like you, Jeff. All right, next topic, and maybe we'll wrap up on this. Both of you guys have written about this. I wrote about it as well. Is the White House trying to cook the press briefings? And Jeff, we started with Ari the last time. We'll start with you. In some aspects, this is sort of like, well, if they can get away with this stuff, I guess I understand why they're doing it. But the White House Correspondents Association apparently doesn't seem to feel quite as sanguine about this. They're trying to ask reporters to submit their questions ahead of time, so basically they can pick and choose which questions they want to answer. I'm going to start with Jeff, and then I'm going to circle back to Ari.
Well, let me put it this way. You talked about CNN and MSNBC maybe missing Trump.
Yeah.
White House press corps that trashed Trump for 4 years, they didn't have that with Trump. Okay? He made himself available every time he left the building, and he answered every question. Okay? And now they have a president who, for all intents and purposes, is still hiding in his basement, but now it's the White House basement, and they want questions pre-approved. Okay? This is what the White House press corps asked for by spending the whole campaign season pushing Biden. Okay? So it's hard to feel bad for them. And yes, I do think they're doing. I spoke to 2 people in the White House press corps off the record. And both of them said, I've heard about it, but it's never happened to me.
All right. Well, let me circle back to Ari on this. Ari, I'm circling back to you, because circling back is big in the White House. And Jeff is circling back too. Look at that. Jeff just said to circle back as well.
I circled back.
I don't have, a huge opinion on this other than to say it's not totally surprising. And Jeff is correct that the White House under Trump was very magnanimous with their time and availability to talk to the press, even if it was sort of a confrontational relationship at times. But I remember when Obama was president, even though they worshiped the guy in some ways and helped get him elected, probably, they weren't always happy with his lack of availability. So, yeah, I don't think Jen Psaki wants to answer tough questions. She only has usually one person in the room that's going to ask her a real tough question. That'd be whoever Fox has there. And they can avoid that, I assume, as best they can, unless someone shouts it from the back, and then they can still avoid it. So, yeah, I think it's unfortunate. It's insulting to journalists who do want to do their job, and I'm sure there are some journalists there who do, and that they won't really admit it, or that they say, well, we're trying to, resume a wonderful relationship with the press after what happened the last 4 years is such an ideological line that it's not even worth commenting more on. So, yeah, questions in advance. It's almost like, it's not quite like cheating on a test, but I don't think it's basically you're just, being told the question, researching your answer, and then you go out and tell it and people watch it, and it doesn't do much, frankly, at that point, especially on important issues.
Well, and there is the question of important issues. By the way, Fox's guy in there is Peter Doocy.
Yeah. They also have the Christian Fisher's in there sometimes in the room.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Kevin Cork, so there's 2 or 3.
Apparently today, Jen Psaki was asked about the Space Force, and she belittled the question, which is kind of interesting because the Space Force was actually a fairly popular initiative with Congress. It got wide bipartisan support to break out to break out the space issues into a separate command. And when she was asked, she says, "Wow, Space Force, it's the plane of today," talking about the question about the colors on Air Force One that she got a week ago or so. It's an interesting question. I'm happy to check with our Space Force point of contact. I'm not sure who that is. I will find out and see if we have any update on that. And Mike Rogers, who's the ranking Republican on I think it's is it Armed Services? Probably has to be Armed Services. Mike Rogers, right? Yeah, Armed Services. One is demanding an apology from Psaki about making fun of the Space Force, because that's one of the few things that Republicans and Democrats actually did together over the last couple of
I can only imagine.
Space Force. I actually heard from my cousin, who's the executive producer of the TV show Space Force. And they are shooting the next season right now, so it should be back on Netflix.
With the Netflix show that was on?
Yeah.
Yeah, his cousin's the exec producer of that.
Did you want to talk briefly about the schools?
Yes, let's do that too. I mean, I'm flexible, so it's fine by me. We got plenty of time. Ari has a really good update on St. Paul's schools, and I think it really speaks to a bigger issue around the country. We should also talk a little bit about San Francisco schools.
Let's not. No, it was about St. Paul, which is for those of you not in this area, that's the capital of the state of Minnesota, and the second largest district in the state. Not to be confused with St. Cloud, where I live, about an hour north, or Minneapolis, which is the largest city in the state of Minnesota. Ed lives in none of these places, but he's a suburban man.
That's right.
So the schools opened up after 47 or 48 weeks closed in St. Paul, and only for K through 2 students. So the rest of the groups, the 3 through 5, people can wait 2 more weeks till after President's Day. We're still calling it that. And the middle and high school kids can wait in perpetuity, I suppose. I'm glad they're open. Up here, they've been open for a couple weeks for the young kids, and they're just opening, I think, today or next Monday for the older kids. Some have been fully remote. Some have been hybrid, as they call it, where they go in a couple days. It's crushing to these kids. I mean, it's just the future of anyone, whether you're in 5th grade, 8th grade, 12th grade, is not going to be the same when you're out of school for what's going to turn out to be well over a year, maybe a year and a half. And it doesn't need to be added to the fact that the teachers and the teachers union, which we can interchange the two. There are some teachers who probably aren't thrilled with the union, but they're going to push it as long as they can. We've seen Chicago, New York, DC, Fairfax County, Virginia, all of California. They're going to run the clock out. I mean, Biden, you and I, Ed, I think talked about this. When Biden said 100 days to open the schools, I said, okay, January 20th, 100 days, that's like May 3rd. Well, most places, the school year ends around mid-May.
Right.
So these places aren't opening in some respects until mid to late August. And I just find it funny they're going to have summer vacation after being essentially on a quasi vacation for 17 months. They're going to have 2.5 more months in the summer to go, attend baseball games or something.
Right. It's a great point.
I can speak about San Francisco for a second if you want.
You better you than I.
Because not only are they getting rid of Washington and Lincoln, they're getting rid of 44 names, including Madison.
And Dianne Feinstein. You know why she's being eliminated? Because she hugged Lindsey Graham. No, that's really why. That is true.
Okay?
Expensive hug.
They have a high school named after Woodrow Wilson, who's probably the most bigoted president ever. He resegregated the army. He was an anti-Semite. I mean, he hated everybody.
Like showing movies about the Klan in the White House.
Big Klan supporter. He was a big Klan supporter.
But that school they're not touching. It just proves that this whole cancel culture.
Getting rid of Edison too, because he hurt some animals. Edison's gone too.
Yeah, because he hurt animals. They're getting rid of Garfield because nobody remembers who Garfield is.
Great president. Short tenure, but a good man.
Yeah, he was good. He was a good man. He was also a Union general. I mean, he was fighting to end slavery. So
Hoover too. Hoover was an incredible.
By the way, speaking of cancel culture, when the show's over, folks, I got something I just put up. they're trying to boycott Publix.
Yeah.
The cancel culture, because someone who is an heiress to the Publix fortune has nothing to do with the grocery chain, but her she's one of 7 children of the founder. She gave money to the Trump rally on January 6th. So now there's a movement to boycott Publix.
Yeah.
That won't work too well in Florida. It's popular.
Right. That's what he said.
I don't see that happening either, but definitely check out lidblog.com on the Publix story. And alphanewsmn.com is where you can find most of what Ari's writing, or AJ Kaufman. And he's smart enough to stay off of Twitter, but Alpha News MN at Alpha News MN is where is where Alpha News is on Twitter. So
I read Ari's stuff every day, and it's worth the read.
Yeah, we're doing well. We've got some more video. We've got some investigative journalism going on, mostly revolving around Minnesota and the Twin Cities. So check the website, sign up for the newsletters. We've got some billboards around town in the city and the suburbs of Minneapolis. And, we're going to do a little redesign of the website soon, I believe. And I think you'll enjoy what not only I'm writing, but what some of our other writers are putting together. And we have some Zoom forums coming up, kind of like what we do here. So alphanewsmn.com.
alphanewsmn.com and lidblog.com, at Yid with Lid on the Twitterses. And I want to thank both of you gentlemen for being with us today. Always great having you on together. Always great talking to you separately. And, just don't use any more acronyms because, San Francisco doesn't like acronyms. It's a BFD up there, I understand.
It made me do an FP.
Dianne Feinstein. Poor Dianne Feinstein.
Dianne Feinstein has been canceled in San Francisco. She should have been canceled over the Night Stalker thing. But I digress. Ari Kaufman, Jeff Dennis, thanks for being with us today. We'll talk to you guys again soon.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. I'm going to go over a couple of things before we leave. Just to, I guess the space laser went away. Jeff's graphic of the space laser was pretty amazing. That was pretty good. Just going to go over the, the schedule. There really is no big schedule here. I'm assuming that Cam Edwards and I will do our usual thing tomorrow at 1:30 Eastern Time, our VIP Gold Chat. I'm assuming that we're up for that. I hope you're up for it as well. So if you're a member, if you're a VIP Gold member, you can join these and all over the Town Hall empire. I do have a new audio editorial coming up on SRN News and the Town Hall editorial site that should be coming up tomorrow, from what I understand. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Let it be a surprise. But you can look for it there, and we'll mention it tomorrow during the VIP Gold Chat too, as well. Wednesday night, tomorrow night, I'm on with Dwayne Generalissimo Patterson in the Universe. Thursday afternoon, right back here with Dwayne again, going over the news of the day. All of this, by the way, is conditional because I'm trying my best to see if I can't get my wife and I vaccinated, and so we're on wait lists. And one of the things about wait lists is when they call you, you got to be ready to go. So there is an outside chance that we would have to either not do this or leave in the middle because we're getting called to come in and get a shot. Obviously, I think you guys can understand why we would just say, well, that's that. I don't have any more coming up today myself, but there is more at Hot Air. At least I don't think so. There's more coming up at Hot Air. By the way, Jeff Bezos, and Jeff Dennis is just putting this in the other chat room, mentioning that Jeff Bezos is leaving his active role at Amazon. He's going to become a executive chairman, which is sort of like an emeritus position. So he will no longer, he's 30 years. He's been doing that for 30 years. That's kind of surprising in and of itself. So he's leaving. And somebody else is going to take that over. I assume that means that he's not going to be really active in anything that he might have been doing with the Washington Post. Rich Alderman had his first shot yesterday. Rick Cuevas says Take Thames on the road. I suspect they'd be a little hesitant to have us in there if I'm in the middle of doing a podcast. But I guess we could try. And Rick Cuevas says he's got a statement from Jeff Bezos. As exec chair, will stay engaged in important Amazon initiatives, but I also have the time and energy I need to focus on the Day One Fund, the Bezos Earth Fund, Blue Origin, Washington Post. So there you go. He's going to focus on the Washington Post, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, he spent a lot of money on that. He might want to be a little bit more involved in that. All right, I want to thank everybody for being with us here. I'm going to see if I can't figure out how to get to the likes, loves, laughs, and all that kind of fun stuff here. And, this thing is always kind of weird. But let's see if I can't get to this. And, there we go. We've got the likes, the loves, the laughs up over here. Let's play a little bit of walking music here while we thank everybody for being with us. And again, we'll be back on Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast with Dwayne Journalismo Patterson. We have Bob Knox and Severe Cruise Conservative at CoolidgeFoundation.org, CoolidgeFoundation.org. Over on the Facebook side, Rich Alderman, of course, James T.B. Douglas, who wishes he could be canceled, but he's not important enough. Yeah, there is a sort of status to being canceled, right? You have to be important enough to be canceled. Rich Alderman giving us the likes. Rich Alderman, Bob Visco, also Bob Knox over on the other side. Rick Cuevas, Mike John Pasqua, Peachy McKinnon, Mike Lehman, Jerry Durham, Dottie Marie, Jim McMurdo, Jim Curtis, the MFP Report, Larry Castillo, and Butch Harvey giving us the care. Jim Gerling giving us the care. Great to have Jim with us as well. Who else did we miss over here? Let's see. Taking Thames on the road would be great. Ryan Small was with us. Hi, Ryan. Great to have you here. Rick Cuevas notes that Hal Holbrook passed away today. He was in his 90s. I forget the exact age. Great actor. Wonderful in everything he did, whether or not it was good. Fletch Lives was not good, but Hal Holbrook was good in it. Dave Bach stands with us, says, look up the Fry's Rebellion for what happened the last time the feds tried to tax property. Yeah, Jeff Hoffert was to me with us. Who else? Rick Trader. Tony Craig Feldman says hi. Hi back to Tony Craig Feldman. Brian Berkey, if we haven't mentioned Brian already, Brian Berkey's with us here. If I missed you, it just means you got to come back on Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast. Until then, have yourselves a great afternoon and don't miss a minute of the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll see you later.